He wore muddy boots and a worn-out flannel, standing silently beside the janitor's closet. His presence barely registered, just a teenager waiting quietly with his hands in his pockets. When the CEO pointed at him and sarcastically dared him to fix a $6 million machine no one else could repair, the entire room erupted in laughter. After all, he was just a farmer's son. But when that boy stepped forward, what happened next turned the mockery into stunned silence. No one knew who his father truly was, or the hidden legacy this quiet teenager was about to reveal. What unfolded in that warehouse would shake the very foundation of Graves systems and rewrite everything they thought they knew. Before we begin, be sure to like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this one. Now let's begin. The air inside the Graves Systems manufacturing plant was thick with tension and stale coffee. Employees moved like phantoms across the polished concrete floor, faces illuminated by the glow of monitors and tablet screens. Conversations were hushed, eyes darted nervously, and the center of all the anxiety was a hulking, steel-framed monument of failure. A state-of-the-art automated packaging unit meant to revolutionize the industry. It had cost $6 million to design, build, and install, and for 2 straight weeks, it had refused to function. Every attempt to power it up ended the same way. Lights flickered, gears stuttered, and within seconds, the system shut itself down. The brightest minds on the payroll had thrown everything at the problem. Software engineers, mechanical techs, diagnostics teams. Even outside consultants had been flown in at great cost. None had succeeded. That morning, Leonard Graves, CEO of Graves Systems, had flown in from New York on his private jet. The man radiated arrogance in a perfectly tailored suit and a wristwatch that cost more than most of his staff made in a month. He hated problems, but he loved spectacle. And this disaster was a PR nightmare he intended to flip into a personal victory. As cameras rolled, he called for silence and stepped dramatically toward the lifeless machine. "If no one in this entire building can fix it," Leonard said with a smirk, his voice echoing across the warehouse floor, "maybe someone from the cleaning crew should give it a try." The crowd laughed nervously. It was a show, one meant to mock, to control the narrative. And then, his eyes fell on a figure standing just beyond the edge of the shadows. Then, Noah Whitaker, 16 years old, stood next to a mop bucket. His jeans were dusty, his boots caked in dried mud, and the sleeves of his faded plaid shirt were rolled up past the elbows. He looked like he belonged in a barn, not a factory. He wasn't an employee. He'd come after school to wait for his Uncle Roy, the night janitor, so they could ride home together in Roy's old pickup. Leonard locked eyes with the boy, amused. "Hey, farm boy," he called out. "Want to take a shot at it? Maybe you'll get lucky." His voice dripped with sarcasm, but he also knew the cameras were capturing everything. The optics were gold, a teenage janitor's helper trying and failing in front of the entire engineering team. More social media content, more control. The room chuckled, but Noah didn't. He lifted his head slowly, his clear blue eyes calm and unreadable. Then, without a word, he stepped forward. The laughter faded. He walked past rows of stunned engineers and high-level executives who instinctively parted like waves before him. Some chuckled awkwardly, assuming the boy was playing along. Others watched in dead silence, unsure whether to intervene or let the joke run its course. Roy Whitaker moved forward quickly, worry etched on his face. "Sir, Noah's just here to visit," he said nervously. "He's not—" Leonard raised a hand. "Let the kid try. It's just a dead machine, right?" The room held its breath. All eyes were on the boy in the flannel. Noah placed one hand on the cold steel of the main panel and ran his fingers along the interface like he'd done it 100 times before. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. He studied the diagnostic screen for a few moments, then crouched beside the base of the machine, examining the dense junction of wires beneath the access hatch. "This was installed backward," he muttered, almost to himself. "A few nearby engineers leaned in, puzzled. Noah reached into his backpack and pulled out a small screwdriver. One of the executives began to object, but Leonard raised a hand again. The cameras were still recording, and this was turning into better footage than he'd hoped for. Noah's hands moved with precision and confidence as he opened the lower panel, exposing the core of the machine's pulse regulator. What he found was chaos. Wires looped in awkward directions. One was pinched between two brackets. The alignment was off, and someone had clearly misread the polarity markers. "That's why the power resets every time it cycles," Noah said calmly. "It's reading the voltage backward." He reversed two connectors, adjusted the sensor alignment, and snapped the casing back into place. Then he pressed the reset panel. For a long second, nothing happened. Then a soft hum began to build. The lights across the control panel flickered to life, green one after the other. The conveyor belt rumbled. Gears turned smoothly. The machine powered on and ran a full cycle without a single glitch. The silence in the room was shattered by gasps and the sound of phones shaking in stunned hands. The boy had done the impossible, what none of the experts could. Leonard's jaw clenched as he stepped forward, forcing a tight smile. "Beginner's luck," he said, a little too loudly. But Clara Donnelly, a senior systems engineer, shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered. "That wasn't luck. That was expertise." She turned to Noah. "How did you know that?" Noah stood up, brushing dust from his jeans. His voice was steady. "I helped my dad build something like this," he said. "Back on our farm." Leonard narrowed his eyes. "And who exactly is your father?" Noah looked him dead in the eye. "His name is Cole Whitaker." The name dropped into the room like a thunderclap. Every face turned pale. The murmur started instantly, growing louder as people glanced toward the factory entrance. And then they saw him, a tall, rugged man walking toward them, quiet and composed. Cole Whitaker, yes, the legend. Cole had once been one of the most brilliant engineers in the country. His work revolutionized industrial machinery and manufacturing protocols. His patents were worth millions. Then, years ago, he vanished from the spotlight after an accident left his wife permanently disabled. He'd walked away from it all to care for his family and run their farm in silence. Now he was here. Noah stood straight, but his heart pounded in his chest. This moment had been years in the making. All those late nights in the workshop, fixing equipment by lantern light. All the lessons his father had passed down, not in textbooks, but through grit, sweat, and perseverance. Noah had learned everything from him. Leonard stepped forward again, his voice steadier now, though a tremor of panic crept through. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, "we didn't realize your son was here. This is quite the surprise." Everyone was watching. This was no longer a staged media stunt. This was a power shift. Cole glanced at his son, then back at the CEO. His eyes shone with pride, but also something deeper. Hope. "Noah is exactly where he belongs," Cole said. "He's inherited more than my name. He's inherited the passion and the skill." The room fell silent again. Even the hum of the machine seemed to pause in reverence. An assistant rushed to Leonard's side, whispering urgently into his ear. Leonard nodded, but sweat had begun to bead along his hairline. This wasn't just a mechanical fix by a janitor's nephew. This was a moment that could redefine the company, possibly the entire industry. Noah turned toward the engineers and managers still frozen in place. "I've been watching your work here," he said evenly, "and I think I can help improve it." This machine was designed to be powerful, but the installation was careless. It takes knowledge, respect, and attention to detail to make technology work, not just software commands. Noah's voice rang clear, each word measured and full of quiet strength. The room had gone still. Every person there could feel the shift. Clara Donnelly stepped forward, her smile genuine and warm. "You could teach all of us a thing or two," she said, her voice soft but sincere. Her respect wasn't flattery, it was earned. She had seen talent before, and she knew exactly what stood before her now. Leonard Graves looked around, his confident smirk fading as realization sank in. What had begun as a mocking challenge to a janitor's son had turned into a lesson in humility, one the CEO hadn't seen coming. The balance in the room had changed. Respect, once hoarded by title and background, now gravitated to merit. "Mr. Whitaker," Leonard began, directing his words to Cole, "if you're willing, we'd like you and Noah to join our team permanently. We need people like you." Cole Whitaker nodded slowly, turning to glance at his son. Noah's eyes shone with something new. Purpose. He hadn't spoken, but his silence spoke volumes. This was a turning point, not just for him, but for what he represented. Janitor's son was no longer invisible. He was a presence, a force, a voice to be heard. Noah took a deep breath as the atmosphere shifted. The weight of judgment he'd carried for so long began to lift. The room no longer saw him as the janitor's kid. They saw him as a skilled engineer with a vision. The moment felt surreal, like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. Yet with the awe came responsibility. He understood deeply. This opportunity wasn't just his. It belonged to every person who had ever been overlooked because of where they came from or what others assumed they could be. Leonard's cold stare lingered for a few moments more, but it held no power anymore. The story had changed, and what was about to unfold inside the walls of that company would transcend the machines they built. It was no longer about parts and programming. It was about transformation, inside and out. In the weeks that followed, Noah and Cole worked alongside the company's top engineers. Day after day, Noah brought more than knowledge. He brought vision. His insights uncovered flaws hidden in plain sight, revealing weaknesses even veteran designers had missed. But he didn't stop at fixing the broken. He reimagined the entire system, merging hands-on experience with technical brilliance. The machines became faster, stronger, and smarter, more efficient than ever before. The factory, once filled with quiet skepticism, now buzzed with renewed energy. There was a sense of hope and momentum, like the entire place had awakened from a long slumber. Doubt gave way to admiration. Curiosity turned into collaboration. The CEO, though still cautious, found himself drawn to the young man he had once dismissed. Noah's determination wasn't just tireless, it was magnetic. It became clear that this was no accident of birth or luck. Noah possessed something rare, the heart of a leader. Clara became one of Noah's fiercest allies. In meetings, she spoke up for him, highlighting his breakthroughs and advocating for his ideas. Slowly, barriers began to break. The old walls of prejudice started to crumble, giving way to something new, respect rooted in action. Word of Noah's work began to spread beyond the factory walls. Industry leaders took notice. Journalists began asking questions. Investors paid attention. The company's stock rose steadily, riding a wave of optimism and technological promise. But for Noah, success was never about money or recognition. It was about something deeper, something that went all the way back to long nights on the farm and silent car rides with his father. This was about proving that background should never be a limitation, that talent and heart could come from anywhere, from anyone, at any time. And then came the day that would mark another turning point. The board of directors called a meeting. Leonard Graves, once untouchable, was asked to step down. His refusal to adapt and his open dismissal of Noah's potential had become liabilities. The world was moving forward, and Leonard was standing in its way. The board recognized it was time for leadership that could balance tradition with vision. Cole was offered a consultancy role, his practical wisdom now seen as invaluable. And Noah was invited to lead the new innovation team. The janitor's son had become one of the company's most vital architects of the future. At a company celebration, Noah stood on stage, looking out at a crowd that once barely acknowledged him. He felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. Every small moment that had led to this point, the long hours, the self-doubt, the quiet sacrifices, was etched in his memory. This was more than a professional milestone. It was a vindication for every person who had ever been underestimated, misunderstood, or dismissed. His father approached, pride beaming from every line of his face. "You've made more than machines work, son," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've made people believe in themselves." Noah smiled, not just out of joy, but out of understanding. This was the real legacy, not the machines, but the people, the culture, the belief that change was possible. The story of Noah Whitaker spread, not as a fairy tale of overnight success, but as a beacon of what could happen when courage, knowledge, and heart came together. The factory transformed into something more than a workplace. It became a symbol of possibility. The CEO's initial challenge had unknowingly unleashed a revolution, not just in machinery, but in mindset. Noah had fixed the engine, yes, but more than that, he had fixed a broken narrative. Years passed. The same factory floor where Noah had once stood, unsure of his place, was now alive with purpose. The machines hummed a different tune, brighter, clearer, more precise. And Noah? He was no longer just a farm boy or the janitor's son. He had become a leader, an innovator, a catalyst. The journey had tested him, professionally, emotionally, spiritually. Doubt still whispered in dark corners, but they were drowned out by results, by respect, by progress. Noah didn't just change technology. He changed people. He changed culture. He redefined what success looked like. One crisp autumn morning, the phone rang. It was Leonard Graves, the same man who had once spoken to Noah like he didn't belong. But today, the tone was different. There was humility in Leonard's voice, almost reverence. He acknowledged Noah's impact, the shift he had helped usher in. And then he asked, would Noah be willing to lead a new company initiative? One focused on sustainable technology that could, once again, change everything. It was a moment of full circle clarity. Noah accepted, not out of pride, but out of vision. He thought of his father, of the lessons born from long days in the fields and quiet nights spent repairing what others threw away. Those lessons weren't just memories. They were the bedrock of his success. Noah had come to understand that his true strength wasn't just intelligence or innovation. It was resilience. It was heart. It was the ability to carry the dreams of others, those who were still fighting to be seen, still hoping for a chance. At the next company-wide meeting, Noah stood before hundreds of employees. He spoke clearly, passionately, not just as a leader, but as someone who had walked every rung of the ladder. He talked about innovation rooted in community, technology that served people, and the power of believing in one's worth. The room was silent. Every word hung in the air like a promise. Outside the factory, Noah's story became a spark. People around the world were inspired, not by a flashy success, but by a grounded, powerful truth, that greatness is not inherited. It is earned. It is built, often quietly, with calloused hands and sleepless nights. The CEO's dare to a farmer's son had birthed something far greater than repaired machines. It sparked a cultural transformation, a movement. And in the center of it all stood Noah, humble, driven, and unshakably human. And as the sun set behind the factory, casting long golden rays across the metal and glass, Noah stood tall. This place, once filled with silent doubts, now echoed with purpose. The impossible was no longer a wall. It was a challenge, an invitation. And Noah was ready. The journey was far from over. In truth, it had only just begun.